На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. We return this week with a little bit more of a focused eye upon the RPL matters after European games took over in the last pod. But we do also have a spate of midweek Russian Cup fixtures just to quickly cover towards the end, and also the latest from Valery Karpin's Russia squad. To cover all that, as usual, I'm joined by David Sanson.
Good evening.
And Richard Pike.
Good evening, James. Good evening, David. How are everybody?
Oh, I wish I could say I was good, but I think I would be lying to myself and probably all of the listeners to say that I am in a very enthusiastic mood after Spartak's loss in the main Moscow derby on Monday. It's fair to say it's another embarrassing step in what is a long line of embarrassing steps in Spartak's entire summer and season so far. But we will put off and hold off for that game right now, and we'll quickly jump first towards the other side of Moscow and one of the teams who were not involved in what's known as the main Moscow derby, and that's Richard. You kept a close eye on Dynamo's game against Sochi the weekend.
Yeah, I did. And this was, if we'll get onto this a little bit later, but if the Nizhny Novgorod defeat at home by Dynamo was totally unexpected, I actually thought this was unexpected too. I must admit, going into this game, I was fearing for Dynamo because, you know, I know Sochi played them last year at the Fish down in southern Russia and completely outplayed Dynamo. I think it was the last game before the winter break, I think. So yeah, Dynamo probably were worried about this game going into it, especially off the back of a shock defeat at home to Nizhny. But they played very well. They showed a good defensive resilience. Obviously, Sochi had more chances in the game, but I felt Dynamo were very, very good and held out really resiliently throughout. Sochi were getting chances, but a lot of the shots were very easy saves for Igor Leshuk, who came in for Anton Shunin, who was injured in goal. A lot of the shots on target were, from what I recall, quite routine saves for Leshuk to make. And the goal was really good as well. I remember it was a play out from the back from Sochi. They found Kristin Naboa, and then obviously Szymanski was right on the ball. Second that pass went into Naboa, he was on him, pressing him, and he dispossessed him really well, and then slid the ball in for Zakharyan, who took a few touches, a little run, a few touches, and then just smashed it into the bottom corner. And I have to say, looking at the incident where he dispossessed Naboa, some referees might have given a foul on Naboa there, but it was a 50-50 call, I think. So it went in Dynamo's favour. But it was good awareness from him to be on Naboa straight away and dispossess him like that. It doesn't often happen, given Naboa's brilliant consistency over the years. And then, Dynamo were, they had a few shots I think the first half was quite even for shots. Then second half, Sochi definitely had a lot more than Dynamo did. They obviously had a goal. Dynamo did have a second goal ruled out for offside, which was quite unfortunate. It was an offside in the build-up on, I think it was on Chukavin, the offside in the build-up. But obviously they brought play back and they checked it with VAR and it was ruled out. It was correctly ruled out for offside as well. It was unfortunate, but it was definitely offside. I just want to single out two players who were key in the victory, and that's the central defensive pairing of Fabian Balbuena and Ivan Ordets, who I thought both were excellent. Balbuena, I saw on the RPL's Twitter after the game, won the Man of the Match award in that game, and he and Ordets were brilliant at the back. There was a case for both of them being Man of the Match. There was two instances which summed up how good they were on the day. There was one where I think Sochi had just gotten down Dynamo's left flank, which was a bit of a weakness for them in the first half. Sochi were getting quite a lot of joy down there, and I think it might have been Naboa who was waiting in the box, and Sochi were just about to fire a cross in, and basically Naboa was just waiting there for the tap in at the near post. I think Ordets just got his body in front of the cross and defended it away. And then there was a second incident, I think it was 3 or 4 minutes later, when I think the ball was just about to thread a pass through for Cassiera, the forward of Sochi. I think it was Cassiera. And then Balbuena did one of those ones where they're not at full stretch defenders, but they're still on their feet, and they just stick the other leg out and just calmly stop the ball, and then he distributed it towards the defence. And it was two good, calm, composed defending like that, which emphasised how good a game both of them had. He did switch it up a little bit. Schwartz. He brought in Vyacheslav Grulyov up front, and Grulyov's nothing amazing, but he's a decent little player to keep around at Dynamo. I think. I don't think he's ever going to develop into a regular starter, but he's a cheap squad option to keep around. He's good at pressing off the ball. And I thought he had a decent game. They brought Chukavin on later on in the match in the second half. And yeah, it was a surprise win, and they atoned for the disappointing loss the previous week to Nizhny, and they currently lie second in the table, with Lokomotiv's draw against Ural, which surprised me, and Rubin's result against Zenit, which we'll get onto a little bit later on. So yeah, Dynamo are now second in the table, but they could have only been just 1 point behind Zenit had they not had that awful loss last week at Nizhny. And I still think that's an issue what they do need to sort, Dynamo, because I'll just briefly go on to that, because they had so many chances in that first half against Nizhny, and they wasted so many chances in the first half. And then I think from a Chukavin miss halfway through the second half, the match turned, and once Nizhny scored the equalising goal, the match completely turned, and then Dynamo lost it late on. So, but yeah, it was a good result to atone for that disappointing loss against Nizhny, and big game at the weekend coming up against Rubin. I think 3 of Dynamo's next 4 games are at home, so this is a chance now to, if they can, keep the pressure up in that fight for the European places. And I mean, who knows if anyone's going to catch Zenit out now, this is the time, because this is when they're going to be embroiled in the Champions League campaign. So, but yeah, it was good to see an atonement for the loss against Nizhny last week. Sochi obviously will be disappointed to lose the game, but I didn't think they played particularly badly. They'll bounce back from this. But yeah, good win from Dynamo. That, I think, good way to bounce back from last week's shock loss to Nizhny.
I think I'm a little bit worried, like you, that although Dynamo played well and have largely for most of the season now, of course, as you can tell by their lofty position near the top of the table. And despite the fact that some of the youngsters up top, like Zahayan, who's got 3 goals, Grulyov, the new signing Makarov from Rubin, and Chukavin are all talented players, some of which very young and can only get better and are exciting prospects. I do feel like Dynamo's attack sometimes is a little bit toothless for the level that they're trying to operate at. It's not necessarily a criticism for them. It's just more so that you can tell that a lot of the players aren't quite ready yet, and they are still in transition. If you look at their highest goal scorer, as the current highest goal scorer in the side, considering they are second, is only Daniil Fomin with 4 goals, 3 of which have been penalties, and 2 of them came in the same game against Ufa. Would you like to see a little bit more ruthlessness in attack from Dynamo, Richard?
Yeah, I think the Dynamo, that's been the issue. Yeah, just not quite being, just not quite taking chances. They've been creating plenty of chances, just not quite scoring enough of them. That's to me been the only issue. Because they're quite decent in defence. They have the odd bad game in defence, but by and large they are relatively solid defensively. I think the signing of Balbuena has been good. He made that bad mistake against Ufa early in the season, but by and large he's been a very good signing for them. I think they beat Real Betis to his transfer, which was quite a coup in my opinion, considering Betis qualified for Europe in La Liga last season. And apparently a few West Ham fans were disappointed to see Balbuena go on some websites I was reading, when they posted clips of what they wrote on Twitter, they were saying they were disappointed to see Balbuena go. So, because he would have been a good backup to keep. But yeah, I think that was a coup for Dynamo. But yeah, it's just up front, it seems to be. Yeah, just need to take some more chances. I think the issue really is they probably do need another striker, just someone a little bit more experienced to help out these young guys up front for them. I mean, they are doing a fantastic job. The likes of Grulyov, Chukavin, Zakayan, considering their ages. But yeah, I think another attacking player would have been good. I mean, they did try in the window for a few, but obviously they were quoted up on the foreign limit. I mean, really, the question you have to ask yourself at Dynamo at the minute with their attack is they are definitely carrying. Clinton Ng's had a mixed spell at Dynamo, I think, but the player that they are definitely carrying is Sylvester Igboon, and I think hopefully in the January transfer window, I think it's time they moved Sylvester Igboon on. It's not worked out, and as when you're working under such a restrictive foreign limit, you definitely need to make sure that you're getting best value for money out of your 8 foreign players, and that's the one slot at the moment. Sylvester Igboon, the one foreign slot at the moment where they're not getting best use out of it because it just hasn't worked out. I mean, I think he would be a good signing for a team lower down the table, but I think it is time for him to move on now and for Dynamo to move him on. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they could bring in somebody in January and move Sylvester Igboon on. But yeah, the squad's coming together okay. But yeah, I just think that's all they need to do. The Nizhny game was a perfect example of, they just need to be a bit more ruthless in front of goal and take chances, because I was fearing when they missed those chances at 1-0 that this would come back to haunt them in the Nizhny game, and so it proved. But other than that, yeah, I think it's been good so far. Could be better up front, but hopefully the January window gives them a chance to remedy that if they can move Sylvester Igboon on, I think.
Yeah, I think Igboon's just got to that stage in his career now where he's on the wrong side of 30, and in a team like Dynamo, he's not the star man, and he really just fades into the behind the scenes. He hasn't started whatsoever this season, and he's behind the pecking order now, behind Makarov, Gruliov, Zaharian, Ng, Chekharvin, and even Sebastian Szymanski. There's one stage of the season where Schwarz actually moved him up to a wide position rather than turning to Igboon, which says a lot about his future. I agree. I think Balbuena's been largely very good, of course, apart from that mistake against Ufa. But it's on the other side of that, it's a little bit of a shame to see Balbuena's arrival push Yevgeniev out of the starting lineup. I thought he was one of the most impressive young Russian defenders and defenders in general last season in the Premier League. But I can see why Schwartz wants Ordetz and Balbuena in the more experienced duo, considering there's quite a lot of youth riven throughout the side. David, are you a little bit annoyed to not see more of Yevgeniev? Because I know you were a particularly big fan of his last year.
Well, just on Yevgeniev, from what I know or understand, my understanding of what I've read is that he's had some contractual disputes with Dynamo. As let's be honest, it's a trend with the young Russian players to have contractual disputes with their clubs. And there was a period where on Dynamo's Instagram page, on their stories, they were blocking out his face.
What?
Yeah, honestly, it was all. And whenever they sort of referenced it, they did it in Russian, and they sort of poked fun at it. But from what I could tell, it was like due to this like contractual thing, and obviously then he wasn't playing at all. So I was like, I sort of inferred from that he was out of the team for those reasons. Maybe that's just me jumping to conclusions, but those two things, the Instagram thing is definitely happening, and I'm sure I'd read that there was some sort of dispute going on. But obviously he did start in the cup, which granted it's just the cup, and I'm sure he came on in a game recently in the league, but I can't remember. But yeah, it's a shame. I think he's up there with Ordetz and could slot in nicely. He's really good on the ball. He had a very good season last year, so it'd be nice to get him back in the team. But whether that contract stuff is true or not, I don't know.
Does nobody in the media side of Dynamo realise the bitter irony in the team that was literally founded by Lavrenti Beria, the head of the NKVD at the time, Ogpu at the time, is literally crossing out images of their employees?
Well, it wasn't like when you see someone's face getting blurred to protect their identity. They were like just like covering him with like an emoji face or something like that. It was odd, and I was like, I couldn't. Or they weren't even referring to him by name sometimes either. It was like there was at one point where I thought it was in his contract that they couldn't put him on Instagram or something. because it was so weird that they were having him there, but just not referring to him by name or identity in any way.
Oh, Christ.
Yeah, it was odd. It was very odd. And he still is not one of the players who feature, like, their Instagram stories are like one of the best of all the clubs on match days in the Premier League. And yeah, still, he just never seems to pop up at all.
So I will now move away from 1938 and Dynamo and quickly mention a little bit more about Sochi, because we did focus more so on Dynamo there, but I think it was warranted considering 1-0 away to Sochi is no mean feat whatsoever, and getting second in the league as well. But this year's, I've seen, especially of late, a little bit of a buck of a trend in Sochi's play, where they are far more on the front foot. Obviously, in the Dynamo game, they had like 70% possession against Ufa, as you would expect, 64%. Even against Spartak themselves only had 50 odd, which is quite low for a Spartak home game. Over 60% against Krylyev, over 60% in some of the games earlier on in the season as well, without exasperating the list. And it's good to see them developing a different style to what we've seen last year. Obviously, they're so effective at that. It's kind of natural for its side, as they do move up the table, to start to dominate more. And it's good to see Sochi themselves developing as a club in that matter. I know we and others have opinions on whether Sochi should be Sochi or Dynamo St. Petersburg still, but you can't change the past, and they are here to stay. So as a club and for their fans, it's good to see them developing the game. Matteo Cassera, obviously, he scored on his debut last week in the 3-1 win over Ufa. Richard, last word on them. How do you think Cassera played in this game? Was he quite quiet or nullified maybe by Dynamo's strong defending?
Yeah, I think Balbuena and Audets did a good job on him. They were probably Dynamo's two best players for the whole of the game. But yeah, judging on what I saw in that game, and I didn't see his debut for Sochi where he scored. Already, I'm getting the impression that this is a quite a big upgrade on Jugancic, and I'm going to be fascinated to see. I'm going to definitely catch some Sochi games going forward, because I certainly think this is an upgrade on Jugancic in the shape of Cassiero, and I really hope this is the final piece that they need up front, because the rest of the team is really solid. I think I've been impressed with the defense throughout the season. Rodrigo, Barach, both good signings. Like to see them integrate Angban gradually over time. I think he will come good. I think what they're good at doing Sochi is they give signings a little bit of time to adapt. I think under Fedotov does brings new signings in quite slowly. But I think in Cassiera's case, they're going to have to speed that one up, and they are doing, because I definitely think they needed a striker. But yeah, overall, I think he was nullified quite well by Balbuena and Audets. But I didn't think he had a terrible game though. I thought he did all right. But yeah, I'm fascinated to see what he can do. I definitely hope he will be the missing piece in the jigsaw, as I just mentioned. So looking forward to seeing him going forward.
So move on to from second in the table to top of the table. Zenit defeated Rubin 3-1 away from home at the weekend. That's only one win in 5 now for Rubin, David. What is at the weekend? I know it was Zenit, but it was almost arguably full strength side for Rubin. With Dreyer, Haksabanovic, Kavica, and Despot all starting up top, obviously. Are you a little bit worried about their form, or no?
Well, that 5 games, it's the first, however many games there is in there, were played without
1-1 against
Despot.
1-1 Krylia, 1-1 Rubin, Kimki.
Yep.
2-0 loss away to Krasnodar.
Yep.
Then slaughtered Ural, and then lost to Zenit.
Yeah, so those first 3 games there is prior to the international break, where we were lacking Despot and Kvaratskhelia, both out injured. So we were playing this ragtag sort of team without a striker up front, because we were using Kostukov in all the games. It wasn't pretty, and we still had Begic playing at the time as well in most of those games. Jevtic was also still around. So the squad changed a lot then after the winter break. When we put the team out against Ural, that was essentially full strength, and then the team didn't change for the Zenit game. So those 3 games where we went without a win, the 2 draws and the loss, I put that as a little blip. It's like we had the same thing last season when Despot was out, and it's frustrating to be so heavily reliant on a player or two to make you play that well, or to make such a difference to your results. But without those two guys, it was a struggle. That's for sure. Haksabanovic isn't as direct as Kvicha is. He's not as fast. He's not fast at all, which is slightly disappointing. I've seen him lose foot races to players who I considered to be slow on a couple of occasions now. So that role, that obviously he's coming, but he's not going to fill that Kvicha role, that given that directness and that pace that he offers. He's going to just offer something slightly different. So yeah, and then obviously this week we played Zenit, and Zenit were just very, very good.
Really good.
Malcolm, Claudinho, and Zuba played really well together. Rubin had gripes with the referee, and I think there was 3 or 4 decisions where they quite rightly had gripes, but ultimately it didn't matter. It wouldn't have probably changed the outcome any much. Zenit went out. We had a good first 10 minutes, and that was really about it for the first half. Certainly, Zenit scored 2 very quick goals. The second goal was the killer because it came very quickly after the first, and it was a mistake, and it was actually Abelgor who made the mistake. Ball came across to him, and he is very one-footed. That's probably one of his weakest aspects, is that he's very predominantly one-footed on his left foot. And the ball came across, and he sort of you could tell he was changing his mind on what to do. He was going to just hoof it, and he tried to hit it with the outside of his boot to his left while the ball was bouncing, and just mistimed it completely and missed it. Zenit then picked up the ball, and 3 passes later, it was in the back of the net for that second goal. And then from then on, it was, the game was dead. The third goal shouldn't have stood, but came before half time. Zenit won the ball back on the edge of their own box via a handball. And then, second half, we came out better, but the game was already over. We scored, but it was an own goal. We didn't really have any shots of our own. Rubin's game plan last season, when you think back, last season we beat Zenit twice, home and away, and on both occasions it was defend hard, score any chance you may well get, because we're not going to get many, because that's how we've set up against these big teams. And in this case, we conceded early. We made individual mistakes then on the second goal. And then Uremovic went off injured, which was a blow, because that's the position where we've got literally no depth other than Talbi and Uremovic pretty much. So we had to bring on Nizhgorodov to play against Artem Zuba, which is never a nice debut to have. In fairness, he did okay. The third goal wasn't his fault. It was the counter-attack after the turnover with the handball. Slutsky got sent off again by Sergei Ivanov. He was apoplectic. And after the game, he said that in his whole career, he'd never been sent off. And then last season, he was sent off once, and this season, he was sent off once, and it was by the same referee on each occasion. And last season, they weren't happy with him. You may remember they in their Christmas video, he ate a biscuit, which was the shape of the referee, and it was Ivanov's name on the back. They said, someone asked them, were you going to complain about him? And they said, no, because there was nothing, because he didn't, I don't know. They said they had no right to complain, even though they didn't want him to referee the games anymore, basically. But there was very little they could do. They would just recommend that he be removed. I think they also did the same last year. But moving away from Rubin, who I think will get back on their horse, as long as Rebic, he's just got as far as I'm aware, just a back muscle strain. So hopefully nothing too bad. But Zenit were very good. Those 3 linked up well. Zuba got his first goals of the season. Azmoun was out with a knock, and before game I thought, oh, this is not so bad. But they were very effective going forward. Sutormian's been playing at right back and doing very well. The Russian Cafu, as Hanu and Artem have dubbed him over the years. It was just one of those games where the game plan for Rubin fell apart very early on, and it was a struggle. But taking no credit away from Zenit, who played some very good stuff and won comfortably in the end.
I remember saying at the end of the window that I was a little bit worried about Rubin's lack of depth in defence, as you just pointed out. Obviously, last game, young Savitsky Stepan. Was it Savitsky? No, it's Stepan Surikov, sorry.
No, Nizhigorod.
Ural. In the Ural game, Surikov had to come on due to the injury to Samoshnikov. And then, as you just said, Nizhigorod had to come on.
I think he just came on because we were 4-0 up. No,
Samoshnikov picked up an injury. And then Surikov came on and Zotov moved over, wasn't it?
Oh, I can't remember. I thought he just gave him a run out.
No, Samoshnikov limped off anyway, but 4-0 up. It's
oh, okay. Yeah, maybe it's
moot point, but
never mind.
But that's 2 games now where you've had to bring in youngsters in non-ideal situations. I mean, obviously 4-0 against Ural is point is it's all gravy, but in the Zenit game, I think it was 2 minutes after Nizhigorod came on, Zuba, when Zuba got the assist for Claudinho's goal, it's not. I don't want to blame Nizhigorod because it's literally man versus boy in that situation. He just rose so much higher than him, and it was quite obvious.
I remember which one it was. Yeah,
and it's nothing against the youngster because 99% of defenders in Russia would still lose the aerial duel, but it was a little bit unfortunate that he was brought on in that situation because it was a little bit of a baptism of fire for him. On Zenit, obviously, it's a big question mark over how you do it when Azmoun's fit. But this system they have of Barrios being the ball carrier in a 3, allowing Sutormin freedom on the right to be a wing back, which is probably his best role. Very balanced midfield, and then Zuba as the focal point with Claudinho and Malcolm with completely free roles off him is a really nicely balanced system that Zenit have. I can't remember last time that Semak played a back 3 for Zenit. It was presumably in the Champions League and the Dortmund game, presumably along that sort of lines. But they just look really balanced. I don't know how you fit Azmoun in because Azmoun obviously domestically is far too good to leave out. But it's potentially promising signs that they can hopefully be more solid and not make a mistake further in their Champions League group games because they were literally one mistake away from a 0-0 draw in London, which is no mean feat against the champions of Europe. But they like I say, against Rubin, they just look really nicely balanced, and they criticised Zuba towards the start of the season, worrying, is he over the hill? We'll get onto it more in a second, but obviously he's turned down the Russia call-up because of fitness issues. So is it time for him to retire and maybe focus on Zenit to get the best out of his league, his club team, maybe? But he didn't look like a man in the twilight of his career whatsoever. And at the weekend, I thought he was absolutely brilliant. He obviously got 2 goals and the assist and was just all over Rubin's, granted, quite depleted backline. But we'll move on now to probably the biggest game of the weekend. I'm not going to dwell on it too much myself because there's only so much that I can rant about with Spartak, to be frank. And these issues haven't just popped up in the last week since we last podcasted because they've probably been there for about 15 years now. But Richard, you kept a close eye yourself as well on Spartak versus CSKA on Monday. Can't say I was surprised too much.
Yeah, I can do the ranting for you. Don't worry, James. We're so used to it over the years, aren't we? I have to say, even though this was the game of the week on paper in Russia before when the fixtures were announced for each week, and this was the game of the week, the big Moscow derby. And I have to say, it definitely probably did not live up to the billing overall. The game, I thought, the weather conditions were really poor. I think it was just literally bouncing it down with rain, so that obviously might not have helped. But I think it's symptomatic at the minute, this CSKA Spartak game, of where these two sides are right now. CSKA in transition at the moment after, a 10, 15 year period of, success and stability, and now, encountering some rocky, choppy waters. But Spartak, yeah, they're in a complete mess. The goal to win it as well came from a Maximiliano Colfrey mistake in the box. He didn't quite get his clearance right, sliced it straight to Zabolotny, who just smashed it home. And yeah, I don't think it was not a great game. CSKA probably did edge it, but I don't think it was a particularly brilliant game. And yeah, more of the same issues as what we were discussing on the last pod. I think with Spartak, this is only actually the second time this season in the league that I've watched Spartak under Vitoria, and I can only watch the last 10 minutes of the Lega game due to work. Due to the Lega game, due to work, yeah, they haven't really provided us with a huge amount of enthusiasm to actually watch them based on their recent performances, but yeah, I watched it, and yeah, just more or less the same analysis as what we can give the Legia game. Really, they were taking pot shots from distance, and these were wildly over the bar. Nowhere near the target, not really testing Akinfeev at all in goal. And yeah, like we were saying on last week's pod, it's just so flat at the minute under Vitoria, and it's staggering how it's dropped so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, I thought when they were replacing Tedesco after all the good work that he did, that there might be a bump. There might have been some bumps in the road early doors. There often is when a new manager comes to a club. But to see just after about 10 games into his tenure now, to still, well, maybe actually more, I think it's 12, 13 if you include the Champions League qualifiers, to see, yeah, about 11, 12 games into a manager's tenure, still just flat performances, not offering much at all. It's obviously not worked out, and he's definitely under pressure now. You can tell. I think, like we were saying on last week's pod, it's definitely a matter of when, not if, Vitoria will depart Spartak. I think there's all that stuff that's come out in the week, hasn't there, about his contract? How apparently if he's dismissed around, isn't it November or afterwards, Spartak would have to pay less compensation. Yeah. So it's coming. I think already when reports like that are coming out, and the results aren't good on the pitch, it really is. It's only a matter of time. And yeah, the whole thing, it's like we're like a broken record with Spartak, aren't we? It's just nothing's happened. And I've got to say now, one observation I will make on it is I'm beginning to even wonder now with Tedesco. Obviously he left due to family reasons were given as the reason for leaving, and it probably might well be the case that it was that, but I'm also beginning to wonder if all this, what has come out behind the scenes in recent weeks, with the Telegram thing, with Popov, with Zarema, I'm beginning to wonder whether this has had an impact on it too, and all that was going on behind the scenes last season. I've got to say, if that is true, credit to Tedesco for working his way through it, because the one thing we definitely all agreed on when he was at Spartak was his professionalism was absolutely brilliant. He really galvanised that team. There was a real togetherness about it, and it was kudos to him of working at Spartak, because it is a madhouse. And yeah, it's just such a shame that he couldn't have had another season at Spartak and maybe even tried to push. Because like I say, last season to finish second in the league was really good, and his first full season there. And I would have loved to have seen him have a second full season and push on to try and, maybe even challenge for the title, maybe even win it. But it's just gone so flat. Jordan Larsson's poor form continues. He was hauled off partway through the second half. There's literally just very little, barring Georgi Zakir at the moment, there's such little positivity out of Spar. He's the one consistent good performer there. Everybody else has dropped off from last season. There's no Alex Kral now in midfield. Yeah, it's really just tanked so much since Tedesco left the club in the summer and Vitoria took over. And yeah, Vitoria's definitely under pressure, especially when nothing is happening and nothing, he's getting nothing, no tunes out of the team. Yeah, it's a matter of if, not when he goes. Yeah, it's a matter of when, not if he goes. It's only a matter of time, I think.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, he's everything you said, I think the word you used was perfect, was galvanized, and how Tedesco obviously galvanized the side to ignore all the on off the pitch bullshit that was happening. But as I think I've said previously on the pod, Spartak managers don't necessarily need to be have the highest tactical acumen in the world. It would be obviously it helps, but because of the size of the club, because of the disparate voices within the club and influencing the club, and in particular influencing Fadoon from behind the scenes, what Spartak manager needs to be, arguably first and foremost, is charismatic. Be it in the Tedesco way, where his infectious personality, whether you even love him or hate him. There was some people who absolutely despised him, but he was the sort of man, when he was in the room, he'd let you know it, and he was just perfect for that job. Before him, Carrera, very much a commanding presence. Oleg Romantsev, arguably Spartak's most successful manager ever, apart from maybe Staritsyn. He wasn't really a very charismatic, open man. He was very much a general, very, very strict regiment that he performed. But he according to contemporary press box goers of the Spartak insiders and so on, he had a very commanding aura about him, just immediate respect. I remember Rabiner telling a story that when he would walk in the press room, everyone would just go silent. It's kind of like a judge walking into court sort of thing. Like, this is my court, weirdly enough. And Vittoria's just the total opposite. You literally watch his press conferences or you listen to his interviews, and halfway through, you either completely forgot about what the first half of what he said was, or you've just left. You just completely switched off. He's like the Russia. He's like the Portuguese Steve Bruce in that aspect, and you can tell the players just aren't getting it. I mean, obviously Tedesco spoke a little bit of Russian. I mean, when I say a little bit, I mean a little bit, like very, very little. So it's not a language barrier. The majority of the players there can speak some form of another language. He's got foreign assistants in for the reason of helping translation issues. So, and I have seen that suggested throughout the Spartak fanatic.ru website. On the forums, and there was a couple of Spartak fans who were saying, oh, maybe it's translation issues. It's like, well, what about the last 400 foreign managers they've had who've done far better than him? I think Alexei, our resident statsman, he said that I think it's the second worst start by a Spartak manager in the history of the club. So yeah, I agree. He's a dead man walking without a shadow of a doubt. I'm not surprised Corfrier made that mistake. I remember when I discussed him with this Belgian journalist after the signing, or ahead of the signing, when we heard about it. And he was saying that it was just more so sheer surprise. When he was at St. Truden, he was a calamity. And he wondered if his agent knew somebody at Spartak, because he's just not good enough for that level, for any level of any club who have got European aspirations. So, an absolute disastrous transfer window in the summer has just had a knock-on effect now to where they're going to limp their way out of Europe and then sack the manager, according to these reports. I loved it when Alexei again shared that in our chat, and just the general response was just a bunch of people who were just totally baffled by why they would agree to that whatsoever. Just absolutely ridiculous. But any word in CSKA though, Richard? Obviously an impressive win, and Beresitsky is doing better than Olic as well, with less experience. So
yeah, just one last thing on Spartak. It's definitely not a translation issue, because Vittoria's worked in Saudi Arabia, and the de facto language when you're working outside of the big leagues, I think, in places like Greece, Turkey, Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Serbia, all these kind of like middling leagues, even possibly even Austria and Switzerland in some cases, the de facto language of communication is English. You're bound to know a little bit at least, to converse with people and stuff. And also, some of the squad can speak Portuguese, like Ayrton. So, I definitely don't think it's down to communication issues. I just think, his time at Spartak has just been a real letdown. I was expecting more. I wasn't we gave him a chance when he came in, but, it's just evidently not working. And I think, it's only a matter of time. But yeah, on CSKA, I think they've stabilised a little bit under Berezutski. Again, we still didn't think it was brilliant when it was announced. I would have liked to have seen CSKA try something, from abroad, try something different. But yeah, he's doing okay, doing definitely, as you said, better knowledge. And yeah, again, I think it's just a case of just giving this. I think this season's just a transitional season for CSKA. See how he does. If he gets you, and make a decision on whether or not you're going to continue with him next season at the end of the season. He's definitely worth giving a full season to this year. CSKA, and they sold Vlasic. They obviously, they sold Vlasic and Maradashvili, so it's definitely a year where they're trying to repair the damage done by Goncharenko. I was reading, I listened to a Spanish Segunda Division podcast recently, and apparently Gais got sent off for Huesca. So with every passing day, any chance of recuperating any transfer fee from that disastrous signing just disappears. But yeah, it's just a case of, I think, before they decide on who takes them forward beyond this season, I think it's worth giving Berezutski a season because he's doing all right so far. Like I said, better knowledge. And yeah, still don't harbour anything brilliant from them this season, but at least it's a little bit of stability and better than his predecessor. So yeah, not too bad from CSKA.
Akinfeev was on top form again. I mean, Spartak didn't necessarily trouble him hugely, but it's just great to see that he is at the age of 35 now and still probably the best goalkeeper in Russia. But we'll move on now to away from domestic affairs and to league domestic affairs and to the national team squad. Valery Karpin announced a larger than usual 34-man Russia squad for the upcoming international games. That probably will be trimmed down before the games themselves. To quickly go through the side, 5 goalkeepers: Guillem, Chupin, Safonov, Kristyuk and Lunyov. Defenders of Zhikia, Kalavayev, Magkeyev, Sutormin, Samoshnikov, Deveyev, Osipenka, Terechov, Chistyakov and Kudryashov. Midfielders: Golovin, Kuzyayev, Mukin, Yerokin, Glushakov, Fomin, Zaharian, Zhemaletdinov, Miranchuk, Ionov, Bakayev, Makarov, Baranov and Zinkovsky. And the 5 forwards are Smolov, Chukovin, Zabolotny, Dzyuba and Gamid Agalarov. To quickly, before we go on to a little bit of analysis of that, to quickly mention Artyom Dzyuba, as I had said earlier, has turned down the call-up due to, fitness issues, the exact term, I think was. There are 7 uncapped players, or 6 uncapped players. 7, thank you. Yuri Chupin, Sergei Terekov, Denis Makarov, Anton Zinkovsky, Gamid Agalarov, and
Makeyev and Chistyakov.
Thank you. I knew I'd forget the last 2. I did this exactly the same thing earlier. But David, what do you think of the squad in general? I'm a little bit worried, but I can also see what he's trying to do, and I'm glad he's experimenting with some players, calling up lots of uncapped names. But at the same time, it does kind of smack that this is just the sign of a man who has no idea what he's doing. I think calling up 7 goalkeepers and 2 international squads is a bit worrying.
Yeah, I mean, the goalkeeper thing it's a bit odd, but everything we've heard is that it's Kafanov or Kafanov, however we want to say his name, who's in charge of the goalkeepers,
which is worrying in itself.
I mean, it was worrying enough that they called up 5 goalkeepers and played Guillaume in all 3 games last time, because he's not the best goalkeeper available to Russia at this point. I would contest that of the 7 who've been called up, obviously Maximenko and Pesyakov are the 2 that weren't called up this time. I would contest that of the 7 who have been called up, at least 3 of them are better than Guillaume. So, but that's just how it goes. So I'll excuse him on the goalkeepers. The bulk of the squad is fairly similar to what he called up last time. Cheryshev dropped out, but he didn't really feature much in the last international break. And obviously a bit of bit of experimentation for some form players, guys who are in some good form domestically, who have yet to get their first caps. Obviously, Makarov waited and was with the squad throughout the Euros, but never played. Makeyev being given a chance to go after his good start in the defence for Lokomotiv this season. Obviously can play in midfield, but I suspect he'll be used in defence because of the depth that we have in midfield and for the Russian national team. Zinkovsky, just as a sort of wild card, I imagine he's one of those guys. He's not as good as some of the other, your Dukes or your Kvaratskhelia, definitely, but he still has that, incredibly good technical level. But his decision making is definitely not as good as those guys, and theirs aren't great at the best of times. But it'll be interesting. I'd expect Zinky probably would be one of those who may well drop out. Glushkov, we talked about it a little bit off air beforehand. He is in good form. He's scored like at least 4 or 5 goals this season. He obviously I had a quick look. He's got 57 caps so far, but the Russian midfield positions are there. Are so much depth available. CSKA, right? And Mukin is in the squad from CSKA. But there's 2 other very good Russian midfielders at CSKA in Obyakov and Akhmetov, who aren't being called up. Both of them have had call-ups in the past. Akhmetov certainly has a couple of caps. I think even Obyakov got capped once or twice. For a guy who has been calling up some younger players, it was slightly disappointing to see that. But we obviously know that Karpin has that Spartak relationship in the past, and therefore I assume has a fairly good relationship with Glushakov, and therefore has given him the nod to come again. I think Akhmetov especially has had a very good season. He's been playing in this more advanced role with CSKA having Zabolotny as their focal point. Chal obviously has been deployed a little bit wider. And Akhmetov's, on occasion, I've noticed him being played as one of the wider players or the most advanced midfielders. And I think he's had a really good season. So, yeah, a little bit disappointing there. But I'm not, other than Glushakov, and, I won't say much about the goalkeepers. I'm not too upset about the squad. I was very pleased to see Agalarov in there, rewarded for his form. 8 goals in 8 games, or I think he's only played 7 games. But, 8 goals this season in the league, plus he scored at least 2 goals for the under-21s and has a couple of assists. It's just some very good form, and that's what you sort of want to see. Players who are in form deserve a chance, even if they're just going to go to the training camp and let the coaches have a look at them. It'll be his chance, and if he doesn't get the final squad, I'm sure he'll just drop into the under-21s. I actually don't know who Russia have got in these next fixtures. I think Slovenia is one of them, isn't it? So they're two tough games. Russia lost to Slovakia before in their reverse fixture. They beat Slovenia, but they're both fixtures where you wouldn't put a hefty amount of money on Russia winning, because you couldn't say for certain that they're the favourite. It's all going to depend on what Russia turns up on the day. Slovakia and Slovenia both got very good high-level players amongst their squad, which, the depth is probably not quite as strong.
Slovenia,
but we know that they're teams who qualify for tournaments on a regular basis. So, they're going to be tough fixtures. These aren't games where I can imagine Russia taking risks and giving debuts to, unless Russia are desperately chasing the goal and Agalarov's on the bench. I can't imagine him actually playing in either of these 2 games unless he really impresses them and they decide they can do something with him, that none of the other strikers can offer. But with Smolov's in there, who's also obviously in good form, it would be hard for him to play. So I think while he's called up some others, I think he'll be very low risk, because these are 2 important games for their qualification desires.
Russia also did actually lose against Slovakia in Spain.
Yeah.
Spain,
They lost that one. Yeah,
with good old Robert Mack having a man of the match performance and getting the winning goal as well after Mario had just equalised it. And on Mario Fernandes, since we last recorded, he has officially retired from the national team, presumably due to injuries building up when playing for the national team, and has decided just to focus on his CSKA career. So best of luck to Mario in his retirement, and hopefully he can get over some of the injury issues which have plagued him in recent times. But I agree. I think it's a weird squad because I do get major red flags from the scattergun approach that Karpin has. I think the fact that he doesn't even take charge of who picks his goalkeepers is really weird. I understand that the goalkeeping position is so specialist and so separate. I think there's that famous Michael Calvin book, or is it the Jonathan Wilson book called The Outsider, where it's all about how goalkeepers have a different mentality as well as different role on the pitch. So I understand that, yes, it's a very specialist position, but he's the national coach of the national team. He needs to take charge. He needs to stamp his authority, even if he is only there for a year. If those rumours that we saw in the press are true, that he is very much a stopgap for the moment until a more attractive option becomes available further down the line. Nevertheless, he's left Rostov to take over national team duties and put his name in the hat to be the man to take over. It's just very bizarre, and I feel he should be putting full authority on the side. But having said that, there are, like you've said, lots of young and promising options, and it's good to see Smolov in such good form again. Obviously, with Zuba pulling out, we'll need that experienced striker. Obviously scored against Malta and played in two of the 3 games in the last break. So a little bit auspicious in terms of potential selection after a bleak Euros, and that can only be good for Karpin because he's got nothing to lose. So we will be covering the games more, obviously, when they happen in the weeks after the pods after the international week. It's a bit weird because it feels like we've just had an international week, and all of a sudden we're talking about international games again, and this needs changed. This really does need changed. Why I think you've mentioned it before yourself, Richard, as well. Why they have all of these spates of international games at this time of year is just ridiculous.
You wish they'd have them all in one batch, wouldn't you? Like October, just for 2.5, 3 weeks, just have one break in a season rather than break in September, break in October, break in November. Just kills the flow of the club season. And we've already just had a major international tournament or two in the summer with the Copa America and the Euros. So, yeah, I think it needs changing too. But fortunately, UEFA, FIFA just don't seem to want to do it. So.
Yeah, certainly. It would be ideal for Russia as well if something like that happened in December. Obviously, UEFA and FIFA don't just decide what's best for Russia, but Russia would benefit from that. Players go off, have 2 to 3 weeks with the national team before Christmas. Obviously, for those who may not be aware, Christmas in Russia is in January. And then have their months off. It would be no loss to the clubs whatsoever. But that could be a potential compromise. But at the same time, that particular time period is arguably one of the most hectic for the rest of Europe, and particularly in Western Europe. So something unworkable there, but I think it does need to change in the future. And with that, we're coming towards the end of this week's pod. We do have less topics than usual because we wanted to go a little bit more in depth in the actual football rather than some more altruistic or out there topics. Midweek there has been a spate of Russian Cup games, as I said at the start. Unfortunately, because they are broadcast on Telesport in Russia, nowhere streams them, nowhere shows them on any form of other service, and Telesport is incredibly difficult to get outside of Russia. So to quickly go through some scorelines, Krylia defeated Znamia Noginsk 10-0. Znamia, of course, the non-league sides where is the home of some former Russian veterans, Rinat Yanbayev, Roman Shishkin, Alexander Rizhikov, and most famously Roman Pavlyuchenko. Krasnodar beat Leningradets 2-0. Khimki drew with Kiransk. Arsenal slaughtered Dynamo Bryansk 6-1. Dynamo Moscow beat Dynamo Stavropol 6-0. Chaika, now with the Finnet L2, beat Rostov 1-0. One of only two, was it, David, RPL sides to lose?
Yeah. Saransk beat Khimki on penalties.
Yeah, thank you. That was it. I forgot those penalties. CSKA beat Zenit 4-0, and Ural defeated Torpedo Vladimir 2-0. And to quickly end this week's pod, unfortunately, it's a little bit more of a somber and sadder note. I don't know how many is aware of, but I presume many have heard the news that has emerged from Perm in the last few weeks. Unfortunately, there's been a shooting at the Perm State University. So all of us at RFN, all of our thoughts do go out with those and the families of those who lost their lives at Perm State University, and hope all the best for their families in what was a tragic incident. And on that, I think it would probably be best to end the pod. So we'll be back next week at the usual time with the usual spate of fixtures covering all of the RPL games. But this has been the Russian Football News Podcast.
Футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Заведи его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет с ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.